Honestly, I would say just stop with all these benefits and replace it with higher pay for everyone across the board. And then things like health insurance, that's their problem, not the employer's. This one's for everyone who disagreed with me on my video about how American public spaces are actually more family friendly than the likes of Ashley Embers say they are. That's all from my observation, though. The way I see it, the fact that I stand by what I said for the most part, like how having a diaper changing station in every public restroom in the country is a good sign, as well as the what few play places are left, like mostly at malls and such, not at McDonald's or anything like that. So for all of you who disagreed with me, I'm back, and I'm here to read an article and react to it called The Solution for Millennial Parents Struggling to Balance Kids' Career by Allie Kelly. Brianna DeWitt didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom. The 35-year-old loves her job. She spends mornings on the early shift as a physical therapist in Oahu, Hawaii. The rush she gets working in a hospital every day makes her years of intense medical training worth it. So when her first baby was born in 2023, DeWitt did her best to make space for her career alongside her new role as a parent. Working part-time seemed like the best of both worlds. She could still get the satisfaction that came from her job, and the scaled-back hours would allow her to spend time with her son and cut down on childcare bills. But then, DeWitt realized that reducing her schedule below full-time would disqualify her family from healthcare coverage and make her ineligible for an employer-matched 401k. And that right there is why you don't tie health insurance to a job. Not only is it really dangerous as an arrangement because you run the risk of not having the insurance if you get fired, laid off, or you rage quit. Well, you'll be less inclined to rage quit if you depend on a job for health insurance. I don't know if Hawaii has a health insurance connector the same way other states do. Just an idea. My husband was self-employed, she told me, so I was trying to hold down the fort as far as our health insurance benefits went. He recently switched to a corporate job so the family could have stable coverage, and DeWitt could continue splitting her schedule between the hospital and their baby. That was really important to us, she said. DeWitt's dilemma is shared by parents and caregivers across the country. Unlike other developed countries, the US offers few legal protections for part-time employees, meaning that people who typically work fewer than 30 to 34 hours a week are left at the mercy of their company's policies. At a time when many millennials are starting families, a shift to working part-time could be a perfect solution for new parents and stay connected to their careers while attending to the needs of their children. While some companies like Starbucks and UPS offer benefits to part-time workers, for most people, stepping back from full-time work can mean losing out on healthcare coverage, paid leave, and fair wages. Or you could just use your state's health connector if you have it, or just get health insurance separated from the job. This way you're not dependent on the job. Seriously, with job hopping being all the rage these days, why would anyone want their health insurance tied to a job? I know one of the commenters on my previous video about this said they can absorb the economic impact or something along those lines. Actually, you know what? Let me pull up the exact comments so that we can do that. But the TLDR for me is a separation of health insurance and job, just like a separation of church and state. Huh. Looks like they did they delete that comment? It's not coming up in my YouTube studio, so let's take a look. Unbelievable. They deleted the comment. Whatever. You're just gonna have to take my word for it that it was posted at one point. And while I understand the reasoning, I'm still personally opposed to the idea of health insurance being linked to a job. Layoffs happen. Unjust firings, unjustified or otherwise justified, happen. We don't live in the 1950s where you have reasonable expectation to work a job for 30 years and then retire with a full pension, never having to change jobs, never having to really worry about any of the other mumbo jumbo we have to worry about today. It could be the same position, the same qualifications, but you have one worker working full time and one worker working part time, and they are given different access to benefits, eligibility for promotions, or even paid differently based on hourly wages. Laura Narevsky, senior attorney at the National Women's Law Center, told me. Wait, do they pay different hourly rates compared to whether you're full time or part time? Like, wouldn't the number of hours make up the difference for that? Or do they have to pay a certain amount per hour if you're full time? Like, at first, when I read that, I thought they can pay differently right per your per hour if you work full time compared to part time instead of just paying the exact same per hour regardless of part or full time. Because at first I thought it was going to be a case of, oh, the full timers make more money because they work more hours. No, apparently there is a full timer boost. Paid differently based on hourly wages. Okay, if it's just a case of they're paid more for because they work more hours, yeah, that's kind of how hourly work works. You are trading time for money. And if you are selling fewer hours, you're going to get fewer dollars compared to someone who sells more of that time for the exact same dollars. At a time when the job market is cooling and businesses are keen to keep valuable employees around, conversations with economists, policy analysts, company leaders, parents, and caregivers made it clear that expanding workers' ability to adjust their hours is a winning idea. Companies that allow parents to work part time could retain experienced talent and save money on hiring, and letting more parents, especially mothers, stay connected to the workforce could be a path to economic growth as a whole. Nearly 3 million part time workers are parents with children under 6 years old. America has a long way to go in terms of making the labor force flexible, but improving part time opportunities is not only possible, it has overwhelmingly positive implications for the U.S. job market. Yeah, if you ask me, companies should just be grateful to get what they can out of someone. If they can only work part time, but they contribute a lot during that time. See, this is why I think paying by the hour is really dumb, except in certain cases like firefighters to make sure that there's no financial incentive for there to be more fires for them to put out, as Joshua Fluke put it. At a certain point, instead, we should be focusing more on what the actual output is, paying by the actual output and not just an arbitrary number of hours somebody just pulls out of their ass and decides to just throw in more busy work or forcing someone to work a certain amount of time, which can never be recovered. I don't know. You let me know in the comments down below if you think there's something broken about trading time for money. If you can get something done really fast, you should be paid the same amount as if you had worked 8 hours to get it done. Because that's the thing, they just punish you for being efficient. Over 29 million people in the US work part time, roughly 18% of the total American labor force. Employees might choose a part time schedule for a variety of reasons. They could be parents or caregivers who need to be home to look after a loved one. Some are students trying to make ends meet while they finish a degree. Others are retirees, people with disabilities, or people working multiple jobs. What all of these part time workers have in common is a lack of federal protections. Yeah, for the students, I'd argue companies should really accept part time work from them because if they're full time students, they kind of have to prioritize that, but they could still be part time workers. And if it's relevant to their degree, I think it would be a great way to have them recruit talent who are already interested in the field and are actively furthering their ability to work in the field with their degree. See, this kind of integration of degree relevant work is exactly what we need instead of working at a fast food place or something while you're in college. We need to replace all of those fast food jobs with jobs that are relevant to people's degrees. Or rather, if you're in college watching this, prioritize finding something in your field that you're studying that you can do part time so that you can get more work experience in addition to the education. And then you'll have the experience and the education that they're asking for. It can be done, it's just not that easy. And companies need to do better by offering that part time work so that if a college student has to work during the semester, they don't have to take up work at minimum wage jobs that have no relevance to the degree except maybe being able to learn processes and some or something like that. Full-time employees in the US are guaranteed some basic rights, such as paid leave and access to company benefits. But once you dip below roughly 30 hours a week, employees don't have the same safeguards. Workers told me that can lead to unpredictable schedules and tight budgets. Part-time workers are about 3 times as likely as full-time workers to hold a low-paying job, and many live near the federal poverty line. In a 2020 report, the Economic Policy Institute found that part-time workers are paid nearly 20% less per hour than their full-time counterparts in the same industry and occupation. And that doesn't include the money part-time workers lose if they don't have access to benefits. Um, isn't it, I don't know, illegal to pay differently per hour for the same position? I mean, unless it's not the exact same position, it's just a general position. I don't know. If you know about more about this, let me know in the comments. Julie Gagny, 63, cobbles together part-time work and gig work to meet and make ends meet while caring for her ex-husband, who is quadriplegic. She is a delivery driver near her home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and often earns less than $20 an hour. It's enough to cover basic essentials, but she hasn't been able to build any savings, and the job can be physically exhausting, she said. Yeah, between how much you have to hustle to make anything remotely resembling a living wage in the delivery system because everyone wants it as fast as possible. And what else? Oh yeah, all the heavy lifting and such. For a 63-year-old, that must be brutal. Candidly, I have not had health insurance in a very, very long time, she said, adding, I'm very healthy, but obviously if something catastrophic happened, I'd be screwed. I've got 4 awards for you. State Health Connector Plan, assuming Michigan has one. This level of economic uncertainty is particularly acute for parents, as the cost of childcare has skyrocketed in recent years, outpacing salaries in some cities. Many have been left behind. The lack of options hits mom especially hard. Deborah Singer, the chief marketing officer at the advocacy and research organization Moms First, said that mothers and female caregivers are most likely to drop to part time hours or leave the workforce altogether. About 6 in 10 part time employees are women, and working fewer hours can have long term consequences. That's not just a penalty that women are going to pay when their child is young, Singer said. That's going to impact their entire career, their retirement savings, and our economy more broadly. I mean, I have to ask, which is cheaper? Just staying home while the other parent works, or bringing in enough to cover childcare costs, daycare? Because, as I've said before, raising a child is not that expensive. And the reason that I'm pretty sure the reason that daycare costs what it does is because they are taking on major liabilities with being responsible for children. So it really depends. If I would say for every individual case, run the numbers. Look at your options. Maybe seek self-employment if possible. I mean, if you have the energy to do things while, say, a baby is napping or something like that, maybe making things for Etsy would be something doable. Or content creation like what I am doing right now. Maybe not at the pace that I output because I do things for this channel almost 7 days a week. But you never know. It's worth trying. I mean, again, run the numbers for your personal situation. Just plug what numbers you feel comfortable sharing into ChatGPT and see which is cheaper. As for the career consequences, I can't really speak for that. Though, let's go back to the article and find out more about that. Having access to a flexible schedule without having to make major financial sacrifices would be a game changer for millennial parents, allowing more of them to stay on the career ladder when their kids are toddlers or in preschool. Right now, though, many have to choose between a steady paycheck and time with their family. I became a mom, and as much as I wanted to be there for my family, I also didn't want to lose myself. Jessica Cuevas, 35, lives in Chicago with her husband, their preschool age son, and toddler. After her first child was born, Cuevas knew she wanted to hang on to the successful career she'd built in academia. To save on childcare bills, she switched from a full-time role in college admissions and education policy to a part-time job as a college counselor for a nonprofit. The move helped her stay in the field she's passionate about, but she said she lost her access to employer health care and retirement plans. Her pay is unpredictable month to month, and she hopes to return to full-time work as soon as her youngest goes to school. I became a mom, and as much as I wanted to be there for my family, I also didn't want to lose myself, she told me, adding, I'm very frustrated with companies and employers for putting the load directly on mom. What if she also wants to grow? What if she also wants to scale up? What if she also wants to get paid more than her partner? This is probably the point where a child-free YouTuber would say that this is why they chose not to have kids. Jessica, in this case, is not wrong for wanting to have kids, but everyone has a finite amount of time, and at a certain point, you're gonna have to make choices. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, if you want to grow in the position, cool. I'm happy for you. But at a certain point, yeah, they should just offer working from home where possible. Like at the very least, if you have to stay home because the kid is ill, yeah, they can definitely do better on that front. Unless the job doesn't have any ability to do anything remotely. Anyway, let's find out what the article says about other countries' handling of this. The lack of protections for part-time workers makes the US an anomaly compared to many of its peers, such as the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, and Spain. In the Netherlands, for example, part-time workers are required by law to have the same access to benefits, time off, and pensions as full-time employees. Not extending these rights to part-time workers in the US isn't just a burden on the individuals, but it's also holding back the nation's economy as a whole. Catherine Ann Edwards, an economist who studies the labor market and economic inequality, said providing more rights for part-time employees could boost the American labor force. Our labor market is much meaner and exclusive than people realize, Edwards told me. Our labor market is very much like, if you can't hack it, you're out, at the expense of people's participation. That is very much true, for good reason. At a certain point, you have businesses need to be able to hire someone who can do the job. Now, I'd argue if they were smart, they would voluntarily offer these kinds of protections for someone who has been there longer, that they know that they can count on. Like, obviously, I'm not in favor of that forcing them to have to provide certain benefits before a certain period of time. Like, a lot of jobs, you have to wait 3 months before you can qualify for certain benefits because they need to know that you'll stick around. Not to mention, it costs them money. Honestly, I would say just stop with all these benefits and replace it with higher pay for everyone across the board. And then things like health insurance, that's their problem, not the employer's. And this is why I'm in favor of some degree of social safety net contingent on the plan of getting back on your feet as soon as possible or having a very specific end date in mind. Like, I'm all for parental leave. I'm all for having some kind of safety net for that kind of thing so that people can enjoy the time with their families that they can't get back. But at a certain point, the company can only pay so much without getting some kind of productivity back. Let's continue with the article. Take the Netherlands. As of 2023, the country's labor force participation rate was 73%, with a slightly higher rate for men, 76%, than women, 68%, largely thanks to the prevalence of part-time work. At the end of 2023, the US labor force participation rate was 62.5%, with a sharper gap between men, 68.2%, and women, 57.3%. Historically, when more people are working, there are positive downstream effects like higher consumer spending and more movement in the labor market. Really? That's the only benefits you can name? I'll admit, higher consumer spending probably means more jobs for like the stores, restaurants, cafes, etc., which leads to the movement in the labor market. But at a certain point, how do I put this? Yeah, all I'm gonna say is You shouldn't be fired for having a kid. And I completely agree that part time work should be available. On the systemic level, that is definitely a better approach. But what we can all do individually is separate health insurance and other benefits from our jobs so that we are not tethered to them the same way, so that we're not dependent on them for all the wrong reasons. For a paycheck to pay for things like health insurance and such, I get. Social safety nets as well. Other than that, let's just keep going with the article. What the US labor market needs is a glow up, Edwards said, but it's unlikely that laws protecting part time workers will be passed on the federal level anytime soon. A part time worker Bill of Rights, which would ensure that all part time employees have access to paid leave and other benefits, was introduced in the House in 2023, but the bill has gone nowhere. Still, companies can take steps to protect part-time workers, even without government involvement. UPS offers pension and some healthcare coverage for part-time employees, and Trader Joe's offers medical, dental, and vision benefits, along with access to a 401k for most part-time employees. The moves aren't just a moral imperative for these companies, they also have material benefits for their business. In a March report for BI, using data from 400,000 plus small and mid sized businesses, the business research firm Gusto found that the average job tenure for part time workers with healthcare benefits is 39 months, compared to 36 months for full time workers and 23 months for part time workers without healthcare benefits. Employees who had access to paid vacation time and retirement plans were also more likely to stay at their companies than those who didn't. When experienced talent stays at a company, employers don't have to spend money to fill open roles. In recent years, Starbucks has implemented similar part time work benefits. It offers full tuition for full and part time employees pursuing a degree, parental leave for part time employees working at least 20 hours a week, 401k matches, and healthcare coverage. A spokesperson for Starbucks told me that most of the company's barista employees are part time. The spokesperson said employee retention at the chain is at its highest level since the pandemic, and the company believes its benefit policies play a big role in that. The spokesperson said the company has seen a boost in traffic to its careers webpage since its enhanced parental leave policy for full and part time workers began on March 1st. Jamie Lee Kapana, 33, is a barista in Oahu and has a 13-year-old son. She's been working part-time at Starbucks since he was a toddler. Kapana said that with past service industry jobs, she struggled to find the flexibility she needed as a new mom while still paying the bills. Starbucks' health, 401k, and other benefits have been a game changer for her family, she said. I decided to leave the restaurant job and commit to Starbucks because of the health benefits, job flexibility, and consistent hours, Kapana told me. One of the biggest advantages was being able to work just 20 hours a week to receive these benefits, not just for myself, but also for my son. More white collar industries are leaning into part time work as well. A June report from the hiring platform Indeed found that part time job postings in sectors like beauty and wellness, marketing, and communications rose by up to 27% between 2022 and 2024. Still, higher paying sectors like insurance, law, and finance remain heavily tilted towards full time roles. A more accessible workforce is a win win for employees and employers. Companies can retain talent, and parents can achieve a healthy work life balance. Plus, as Edwards told me, more workers equals a bigger economy. Full stop. Yeah, that's not a bad thing, a larger economy and such. But you really gotta look beyond just that. Yes, the economy is a vehicle for getting goods and services out to people in a cost efficient manner. Honestly, we really shouldn't have to have a distinction between full time and part time. It should just be, can you do the job? Yes. Okay, we're going to pay you based on tasks, not the number of hours. We only pay you by the hour if you are on standby for something, like firefighters on standby for if there's a fire they need to put out. This way, we are not financially incentivized for there to be more fires to put, put out. So nobody has any reason to go out of their way to start any fires. I also think they have firefighters do other things. Again, I think hourly pay is better suited for something where you're in standby. First responders, that's definitely a better setup. Not just firefighters, police as well. They might end up not having much to do. They might end up having a lot to do. Same thing with hospitals. If you have those go by the hour, then you're going to incentivize a lot of people. They're going to have a more of an incentive for people who are injured to come in and seek assistance. Now, if you can have them do other things that, like what firefighters do beyond just putting out fires, like maybe preventative things that don't cost people as much, there's an idea. But yeah, I'd say for like white collar work and other types of tasks, like blue collar ones like plumbers and electricians, they should be paid by the task. If it happens to take them less time than what their hourly pay would be for the same thing, let them just keep the money they would get if it took up that amount of time, and then they have the money and the time. White collar workers offer remote if you're trying to raise a kid because that can generally be managed. Yeah, you might have to give them like lower ranking tasks, the less urgent ones, so that if they have to say take their kid to the emergency room or something, then they can do that. No questions asked. Yeah, there are solutions, but ultimately we have to find the balance between what we can do on a systemic level and choices we can make as an individual within the system we have to work with for the time being. And hey, when it comes to raising kids, there's always going to be sacrifices involved. Like, you're always going to have to make personal sacrifices for the good of your kids sometimes. That's just the way it goes. You don't have to like it, but as my sociology teacher said, these are the facts. Now, you can have the interpretations of the facts, like, oh, this is unfair. We need systemic change for balance, which I can understand. Or you can interpret it as, oh, we need to have someone stay home with the kid full time until they're old enough to go off to school or something like that. Or you can also have the interpretation of it as, oh, I shouldn't have kids then because of this. Like I said earlier in the video, a lot of the child-free YouTubers would probably point to this as a reason to not have kids. Personally, if all of this changed tomorrow and it was super easy, I would still choose not to have kids of my own because, quite frankly, I still don't want the responsibility, even with all of that sorted out. But I'm going to leave it here for the video on that note. You comment down below solutions you have in mind. I'd love to hear your honest feedback about all this. Give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos, and I'll see you soon.